Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Chart Market Trade Group, and it is Friday, August 27th. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only in this video. Everything that we're going to be talking about here is for education purposes only. If the video is a little bit blurry, it's because YouTube takes a little while to render the high definition version of the video. So let's talk about the market. This is the market recap video. Pretty much, huge rally today. We'll talk about. We'll definitely go through some charts here in this video. I thought it was interesting. Obviously, the sector performers, and I also have the week's performers as well up too. We'll review that in just a second. But SPY had up just under 1%. Q's up the same. They were flirting around with up 1% for the session, but really where the massive move was is what were in the small caps, micro caps. They were up 2.8%. That makes it up 5% for the week for the small caps. Huge performance. The bonds actually rallied a little bit. Gold and silver rallied a little bit. What was down big was the VIX. VIX all the way down to 16. So before we get into the 16 handle, we haven't seen that in a while. Might as well bring up the VIX. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty astounding. We talked about this just about a week ago that when we had that jump in volatility right around, right before options expiration, we just talked about how it looked like it had the chance to be just another quick episode of volatility, which we know is quite normal from time to time, and you can see how quickly, again, that dissipated. Very similar to the last couple times that we've had a little bit of a jump in volatility. So that's the VIX. Let's go over to the S&P. We'll talk about, you can see market breadth on the bottom of the screen. Very strong again. When this is green, I like to refer to this as minty green because, that's just the color of it. But very strong. And if you look at the advancing declining names, look at how even Bloomberg lit that up today. S&P had 438 advancing names, 66 declining. NASDAQ also a boatload of advancing names versus declining, 23, 24, 575 versus 575. Really nice performance. So the technicals in the S&P were at new highs. Again, if you look at a little bit of hindsight 2020, but that check back to the top of value was a key level of support. Notice that we had the hammer bar also kind of just barely touched that 50-day moving average, but stayed above value thereafter. Also for the week, one thing that we talked about this morning was that we did come back to the top of value. That was one of my predictions for the week, that I thought we would see a little bit of volatility that would bring us back to kind of touch some support, and then we rallied. So let's talk about IWM for just a second. Clearly a big move there, and we're basically close to the top of value. So I haven't really been trading this because I don't trade a lot of sideways things, but really nice if you've been just playing the ranges in this. We got to the bottom of the range once again. What is this, right around 210 211 level, and snap back and trying to go to the top of value, and we'll see. I mean, when you look at this chart, and I know some people have been looking at this weekly chart and saying, hey, maybe this has just been consolidation. One of the things that you've heard me say over the last past weeks, once we get to Friday, is that I have not liked that the IWM was underneath the short-term moving averages, right? I've got the 20 here, I've got the 5 here, and price was kind of leaning below, looking like it was possibly going to break down. What we needed was a bar like this that would get us back above. So, is this a false, was this a little bit of a false breakdown? We'll have to see. Sometimes there is a shakeout before I move higher, and I'm not predicting that in IWM, but I will certainly be watching. I think the level to watch is this very close to where we made a high, and we're about, $7-8 away from that. That's we're at 226.40. You could see this Venom line, which is an extension away from the value areas. We're very close to that level, and that'll be what I'll be watching for a break higher in the small caps. All right, we'll talk just briefly about what happened at Jackson Hole. This is something. Now I say a lot of things in these videos. I'm not always 100% correct, but one of the things that I said was once they finally announce when they're going to start tapering and how they're going to do it. How I phrase this in past videos and how I said this in the room is you might get a knee-jerk reaction once it gets announced, to the downside, but then we might actually rally off of it, right? So that's what I've been saying, and I thought it was kind of interesting that we really didn't get a knee-jerk reaction to it. But so if you take a step back and why did we rally on this announcement? Well, I think for two reasons. Number one, it takes uncertainty out of the equation, right? We've been hearing this for weeks, maybe even months, about when is the Fed going to start to taper their asset purchases? When, will they, won't? I've been calling it will they, won't they, because we've heard every Fed speaker talk about their own opinion, not only about tapering, but about jobs, about inflation, all the whether or not inflation's transitory. We've heard a number of opinions about this. So to finally start to go ahead of it, to get this done, I think takes the uncertainty out, right? And now that you kind of know, now that you can, now traders are making some decisions, right? And I think specifically that's why you saw some buying today, is that not only does that take the uncertainty out of the equation, but it also sounds like they're going to be very gentle. Like Powell said, that they're going to be very gentle with, reeling this back. And yeah, so I think it's a good thing. The other reason too, I think it's a positive too, is because finally it kind of means that the economy is strong enough to say that perhaps we don't need that. Again, that's my interpretation. You could disagree with that. That's fine, but that's what I'm going with. And I've and I have said now for a number of weeks that I thought this would actually be a positive thing. For the market once they do announce the tapering. So here's Nasdaq as well, out to new highs. When we go through the list of the performers for the day, not the usual suspects. I mean, look at the move in energy stocks. Also, metals and mining were up 4.5% today. Gold miners were up 3.6% today. But yeah, the oil and gas was up 5%. So again, it felt like some of these areas, because again there was really good participation for the day. So even some of the names on the top, if you go down, you've got a lot of names in the green here. So a lot, even like the software was up 1.5% today, very strong. But it kind of felt like, hey, we've been seeing this breath that's been pretty bad. So what has to take place a little bit is to buy some of these areas that have been really underperforming. The banks did pretty good today too. They were up 2.9%. So again, just more participation, right? A lot easier on days like this if you're in multiple areas of the market. Very strong. Just to look at a couple. So I mentioned software. Software has been very strong, and one of the tweets that I sent out last night was just talking about, how many of these both little and large software companies, if you want to include Salesforce and Workday now, but how many of these little software names have just been crushing it on earnings? BILL was the one today. I mean, 288, up 30%, this company. So just a massive run. And like I said, we've seen this now a few times through this earnings cycle. So what can you say? Just impressive price action. I wanted to go over a couple other areas that I thought were interesting too. The semiconductors, right? Very strong. We heard about a couple companies like increasing their dividends, increasing their buyback, like ADI moved pretty decently. All right, Analog Devices was down today. Sorry. But they were one of those companies that did that. Lam Research as well, I think, increased their dividend. They were up at 4%. Again, I don't really like these charts that much, but I do like I do like what happened in ASML. This is a name that we added to the TTG Trend Portfolio right in here. So this thing has been this thing has been nice. Again, it's not easy. It's not easy to add things. Like if you feel like you've missed the rally in some of these things, you kind of have to wait. You kind of have to pick your spot a little bit, even though it's at an elevated level, right? So this really nice bullish engulfing candle engulfed this body of this. That was at 760, 770. It's up to 832. I mean, really impressive since we added that one in the TTG Trend Portfolio. The other thing I would say, we're going to get to this week's performance, but let me finish just going over here. I mean, NVIDIA has been an absolute monster. AMD joined in a little bit. You finally got this nice move. We've been seeing call activity all week in AMD. Even things like Avago, Broadcom. Not Avago. Broadcom is the new name. Look at that candle for the day. This has been a slower moving name, but if you want to be in a couple things that are a little bit slower moving, I mean, you can't argue with that candle for the day out of a breakout of a sideways range bound kind of reaction for the last 5 months. So really nice looking chart there. Then just a couple other things too. All right, the home builders, they're very close to breaking higher here. I think they were announced as like an IBD swing idea or something like that today. So I actually bought some of this. I've been long Lennar for a while, but I like what's going on here in the builders. They didn't close on the absolute high, but they look strong. But yeah, semi's very, very impressive. A couple other areas that the steel names acted very well today. Wait for some of these names. Remember, this is a name that had good earnings. ATKR. The other name that I like in this group is Steel Dynamics. Sorry, Thinkorswim is a little bit slow. Nucor is another name, and then I like what's going on in the material names. They had a big day. Specifically, I love the chemical companies. Right, look at what happened with Olin Corp. Right, big move there. Dow is another one. Really like this chart as well. You got your first nice break above value. Maybe this thing, and look at the volume today too. So again, there was very good participation, and some of the things that went up the biggest weren't just the growth names, which I find kind of interesting. Some names that I'm looking at for next week, well, there's a couple of them right there. I also wanted to mention just the awesome performance of Google. Congrats if anybody owns Google. What a move and a breakout here. A couple of names that I'm watching for next week. I did add a trade of WY. I like this Weyerhaeuser. Again, something a little bit different, right? Just broke out here, full green bar. So I actually added this one. I'll be watching Costco next week. Again, Costco's been on such a nice run, but look at the move into the 20-day moving average, right? Some of these names, they just don't give you that many opportunities to buy the dip. Now, this hit a high of 460. It's off about $10, but I think pretty interesting, right? All right, so we'll leave it there because I don't want to have a real long video for the weekend. I mentioned I would go over the performance for the week. Of course, S&P was up 1.5%, but here's your small caps up 5%. The Q's no slouch up 2.3%. EEM, we finally had that participation by the Chinese internets, which was basically just one day this week. They were up for the week. Where is this on my sheet? 9.6% for the day. The only thing that was down on these top lines was bonds. Bonds were down just slightly for the week, down a little bit less than 1%. Again, looking at the best performers, let's look at the worst performers first. One thing that kind of jumps out at me is utilities, staples, healthcare, REITs. These have been all like the area of the market that there's been a lot of hiding out in some of these areas, right? There's certainly investors wanted to have exposure to equities, but it has been over the last couple months things like utilities, right? Look at the utilities chart, right? This thing finally took some time and saw a little bit of profit taking. Same thing with healthcare, which has been stellar this year. Finally a little bit of profit taking, not much, but a little bit. I was long for a while, like I was holding a portion of my cash balance in this SPLV, and I took this thing off right around like 64.40, 64.50. It was a nice hold. I wasn't really looking to make a lot of money on this, but it methodically grinded higher. But I thought enough was enough, and this thing was getting extended, and I think I did a pretty good job at this. I think it's worthwhile looking at these things now because they're just into the 20-day moving average. And who knows with this market, the way that we see rotations back and forth into some of these areas. But the semiconductors, I love to see that. They were up 6%. The clean energy stocks were also in there too, even though, interesting, clean energy just continues to underperform some things like, you could call this dirty energy if you like, the XOP, the OIH, and so on and so forth. So steel names in here as well. Blockchain names are in here as well. International performance is down here, but what can you say? I mean, this was, in terms of all the things that transpired this week, I mean, even you could call it, I guess, a terrorist attack that happened yesterday. Pretty resilient that these markets are. And, it just shows the investor appetite for these names. The little dip that we had yesterday, which I thought was basically, regardless of the events, were just, a day where we needed to kind of cool off a little bit. So we had that yesterday and then off to the races for today. I don't talk about the TTG Trend Portfolio. Given I think, everybody was expecting this something to happen in this Jackson Hole meeting with Powell, with the Powell speech. It's tough, if you wanted to be defensive coming into today, and if you weren't holding a lot of positions, then you had to chase a little bit. One of the things that helps me, and everybody's different, but I have two different accounts, and I have my trading account where I'm doing a lot of short-term swing trading, which I'm a swing trade. I am a swing trader, but sometimes my swing trading varies. I do hold some names that are like medium-term, long-term swings, but I've also been doing over the last couple months a lot of short-term swing trading, and it's tough to time the market all the time, with that type of philosophy. And that's why I also have what's called the TTG Trend Portfolio, where I'm holding about 30 names, and I manage those 30 names and look to substitute, just like I talked about. We added ASML last week, but it's a really great way to just kind of have a portfolio that I remain watching, but unless there's a real big sell signal in the market, my goal is to stay with the trends. Right, and here's our 1 month performance. If I can bring this over here, but that's not bad. I think the S&P over 1 month is up just a little over 2%, right? And if you look at this performance, right, we're outperforming nicely, right? And that's my goal is to outperform. So up 5.6% for the month. That's a nice little return there. And you could see, so this is out to new highs as well for the year. So, guys, have a great weekend. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you guys on Monday.